So, Ms. Pengrino, you just watched Frankenstein, the 1931 classic starring Boris Karloff as the monster, and it was one of two movies from 1931 that kicked off the universal horror movie craze of the 30s and 40s, Frankenstein. What did you think, Ms. Pengrino, of Frankenstein?
I like Young Frankenstein better.
Okay, I mean, that's fair. Young Frankenstein, of course, is the beloved comedy parody of the Frankenstein franchise, really, starring Gene Wilder and Peter Boyle, Mel Brooks, the legendary Mel Brooks directing. I mean, I get it. I get it. You know, Frankenstein, Young Frankenstein is a fun movie compared to... Why'd you jump like that?
Well, because it was a little scary. I did not expect him to jump.
So it spooked you.
Yeah, that spooked me more than the movie did.
So,
by the way, pause 2 seconds. Look at these awesome earrings. They're my Halloween earrings. Hocus pocus.
They're a little, coming in a little blur. There we go. Now you're focused.
All right.
Well, Lottie frickin' da!
All right. Well, yeah. So you liked Young Frankenstein better. Fair. It's a beloved comedy, but there is a lot of here we go. I don't. Every episode we do.
Wake up!
Yeah, but no. Overall, Ms. Pengrino, what did you think of?
The Frankenstein. It's alright then.
Was there anything like in particular you liked about the movie?
Well, we're waiting.
No.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
It's just... It was very predictable.
Well, it's supposed to be predictable.
Basic.
We're not really reviewing the movie, obviously, because the movie is almost 100 years old.
Is it really?
It came out in 1931, so we're over 90 years old.
We're getting close to that.
So yeah. So it's not really a review. It's just like this time last year, I actually sat and watched the first 3 Frankenstein movies back to back to back, and I was like, I want to do just kind of like a cursory review, kind of like a love fest of these movies. But we had everything planned out last year, didn't have time to do it. So I said, next year I'm bringing you along. And
this is supposed to be a love fest of these movies.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, because I mean, I love these movies. I was just going to do it on my own, Ms. Pengrino, but we're going to do, that's the thing, is we're going to do the first 3 Frankenstein movies this year, or this month in October, because it's the Halloween month. It's October. Happy Halloween.
Okay.
And so I wanted to do these 3 films. Had I done them by myself, you probably wouldn't have been in very many videos in the month of October. And this is your month. This is Halloween month. So I didn't want to leave you out of everything. So that's why I said, okay, well, I need to get you on board with this. And now look, you're funking it up here.
I don't mean to funk it up. It's just, I guess because it was filmed so far back when, it was hard for me to really keep my attention to it.
Well, I mean, that's what makes that's what makes it a classic, and that from what they did in that movie is what influenced. You mentioned Young Frankenstein. So many great things came out of Young Frankenstein because of the first original 3 Frankenstein films, which is what we're going to do this month in October. There's actually 6 Frankenstein movies from that time period. We're only doing the first 3 because the last 3 are like just cash grabs.
Ridiculous.
They were not as good as the first 3 films. They were literally just capitalizing on the Frankenstein franchise at that point. It was like, how many more ways can we make the monster come back to life? You know? It was just, and the ways that they did it just started to become absurd. As a matter of fact, the last 3 Frankenstein movies is what really inspired the final half of the Friday the 13th movies. Starting with part 6, Jason Lives. It's always like some comical way that he comes back to life.
Yeah.
And Jason Lives, it's a bolt of lightning to his heart that brings him back. In part 7, it's telekinesis. In part 8, it's electricity from the big boat. And then in part 9 and part 10. Jason Goes to Hell and Jason X respectively.
I thought we were supposed to be talking about Frankenstein.
He doesn't. They don't even explain how he comes back in those movies. He's just there. He's just there. He's like, he's here. Get over it. So. The Frankenstein movies really heavily influenced the Friday the 13th. I just wanted to throw that in there. Oh!
Oh, good for you.
But yeah, we're talking about Frankenstein. And like I said, we're going to do the first 3 films, which is Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, and Son of Frankenstein, which is a solid trilogy in the Frankenstein series. And every movie after that was just kind of meh.
I mean, this was just kind of meh.
Miss Pengrino, that is blasphemous. This is a frickin' classic.
Everything was over dramatized.
It's melodrama. That's the whole point. It was.
Well, I guess I don't like melodrama.
Now I know what it feels like to be gone.
So, I mean, we're going to get deeper into that, obviously, but like the thing about those early movies, these were the movies that came out at the very beginning of sound pictures, but they were just finally putting sound into movies. So they didn't really know what to do. They were very confused those first couple of years of how do we do this? Do we just have people talk, and then when they're not talking, it's just dead silent? And
Awkward.
that's what it is. What's interesting about horror movies is that, in my opinion, is very atmospheric. It really sets the tone, and it makes things creepy when there's just dead silence. Like there's that shot of Frankenstein's monster when he first enters the room. You first see him, after he's come to life, and you see him open the door, and then they get a close-up of Boris Karloff in the makeup, and it's just dead silent. Like, in today's day and age, you'd have some creepy music playing behind it, or maybe that's where the grand symphony comes in. Dun, 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 there he is.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, no, back then, dead silence. And that is creepy. That's a creepy element.
It is. So here's the funny thing, okay? I love this month. I do. I love the spooky month. I don't like scary movies.
But
I don't like haunted, creepy things.
These
per se.
movies, and I'm pointing to this poster in particular because that poster encapsulates. It encapsulates all the classic Universal horror monsters from Phantom of the Opera all the way through Creature from the Black Lagoon. And so, those movies are not very scary. They were scary back then. Now they're classics, and they're fun to watch.
Maybe more so for you. I did not grow up watching those kind of things. So it's not, it's just... It just is.
It just is
for
what
me.
it is. I
guess I kind of can't get the classic behind it because I didn't watch those kind of things. Mm-hmm. So
what
I don't
did you watch,
understand.
What kind of like Halloween themed movies did you watch when you were a kid?
I watched like A Nightmare Before Christmas. I watched Clue. I watched
Hocus Pocus.
Halloween Town.
But see, that's okay. So I think there's
Haunted Mansion.
There's like 3 different levels of horror that you can watch. Okay, the level you're talking about is more like horror comedy,
yes,
family horror comedy.
Yes.
And then there is classic horror. I guess there's 4. There's the family.
Oh, The Grudge. Who?
That's a different level. So you're doing family friendly comedy horror. Then there's like regular comedy horror, like this movie back here, The Frighteners, which by the way, we have horror movie posters behind us. The glare from the lights kind of blocking them out a little bit there, but there's The Frighteners, and The Frighteners is a favorite movie of mine. But it's like a legit horror movie, but it's also very funny, kind of like Shaun of the Dead. So movies like that,
which I can watch.
Horror comedy.
Yeah.
And then you have classic horror, which is where we find the Frankensteins, the Draculas. Nowadays, we also would find Freddy Krueger, Jason, Michael Myers. We'd find them in there as well. And then there's this straight up frickin' horror. Your Annabelles, your Grudges, The Ring, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Today's modern horror films. So those are the different levels of horror.
My heart stands to stay.
Oh my God, she's having another seizure.
But you see that sucker over there? 0 to 60 in 4.1 seconds.
My heart tends to stay, there we go, in the family zone.
Sure.
I can handle some more new scary if it's more blood and gore.
Seriously? See, I can't do that because it makes me literally physically ill.
Yes, I don't do jumpy, in your face, like everything's calm. Yeah, that. I can't do that.
Whatever.
It freaks me out. I don't like it. It makes my heart jump.
For me, that's like the exact opposite. I like the creepy atmospheric stuff, whereas the blood and gore are just like, that's such a waste of a movie plot. Like, why do that, you know? So that's kind of like my thing. So actually, fun fact, you know, this is not the original Frankenstein movie. Did you know that, Miss Pengrino?
I did not know that.
The original...
It's 100 years old. You would feel like it would be the original.
It's funny you mention that because the original Frankenstein film is now 114 years old.
Jesus.
The original one came out in 1910. And it was more of like a melodramatic play. Now, if you want to talk about creepy movies, silent horror movies, those are creepy as hell. Like Nosferatu, that's the Phantom of the Opera, the original Phantom of the Opera starring Lon Chaney. That shit still holds up. Because I mean, it's again, like, you know,
it's creepy.
Silent movies are kind of creepy anyway, because, you know, from today's standpoint, you watch like a horror version of that, it is kind of terrifying. And the Frankenstein movie from 1910, it's kind of horrifying. Just to give you an idea, Miss Pengrino, of how old that movie is, do you know who the executive producer was of that Frankenstein film? Thomas Edison. And
it was not.
I'm not even kidding. Thomas Edison, because that was still so.
Of the original.
Of the original in 1910, not 31, 1910. But it was because there was no Hollywood at that time. So like the motion picture business was still so brand new. He who is credited for creating the moving picture,
it's Thomas Edison.
Thomas Edison was given credit. He wasn't like in charge of the movie.
The more you know.
But yeah, but he was executive producer of that film, which, again, now me and you will agree on this. People watching may have sound off in the comments if you agree. We are actually not believers that Thomas Edison was the official creator of the moving picture. A gentleman by the name of Louis Le Prince, we believe, was the real creator. He mysteriously vanished.
Or even the Lumiere brothers.
Yeah, they
more of a claim than Thomas Edison.
Le Prince mysteriously disappeared. Very mysterious circumstances. A lot of people believe that Thomas Edison had him rubbed out. Not in the good way.
Okay.
Why I like to be nude.
And canceled. So I thought you might like that little piece of trivia there. The 1910 version of Frankenstein was the first one. That's 2 years before the Titanic sank. I just put that into perspective for you. Also, actually, we talked about this earlier to put this in perspective.
Oh no, I've gone cross-eyed.
Also, to put this in perspective, we talked about this yesterday, because yesterday was a huge milestone in presidential history, because we're recording this on October 2nd. On October 1st, a huge milestone in presidential history, Jimmy Carter turned 100 years old, the first president in U.S. history to ever reach 100 years of age. And so to give you an idea, he's born in 1924. When this movie, The Phantom of the Opera, came out, he was a year old in 1925. And when Frankenstein, 1931, came out, he would have been about 7 years old. So, yeah, that just gives you an idea of how old he is.
Damn.
He could have theoretically gone to see Frankenstein in the theaters when it came out.
Probably not.
At that time, it was too scary. Probably.
Too scary, yeah.
You couldn't
Probably
take the kids.
not.
But overall, though, like,
probably would have been rated R if they had ratings back then, but they did not.
I don't think it would have been. I don't think it would have been rated R. Well, dude gets hung. That's another thing.
Dude gets like ripped to shreds.
Sorry, hanged.
Why are you the way that you are?
But yeah, let's talk about some of the more brutal scenes of that movie, because there are some things that could have been like considered very brutal in like 1931, like the assistant of Dr. Frankenstein, Fritz. He gets hanged by the monster because
Is it hanged or is it hung?
I think it's hanged.
I think it's hung.
I'm hung.
Okay.
Why I like to be nude.
Like
and canceled.
The abuse of Fritz to the monster.
Yeah, like he
tortures the monster.
He's psychologically torturing the monster.
Don't blame the monster.
Yeah, no, Fritz got what he deserved. But the most brutal scene in the movie, and this was something that you would never see in movies back then, was when the monster killed the little girl.
Oh, yeah.
And again, this kind of comes into play, and we'll talk more about this, is like, is the monster really a monster, or is he misunderstood? It kind of comes between, is he really a monster that wants to kill, or does he just not understand? And so in that scene, it's awful that he kills the little girl, because what he does is he and the little girl are playing. They're throwing flowers into the water, watching them float. and then they run out of the flowers, and so the monster then picks up the little girl and throws her in the water to see if she would float. Obviously, she does not, and she dies. And then there's this horrible, the most brutal scene of that.
I'm guessing she can't swim.
Right, but the most brutal part of that is when her dad is carrying her lifeless body through the streets, and he's just like at 1,000-yard stare, and he's walking to the police station, and it's just like, wow, like that. Could you imagine seeing that for the first time in 1931? How brutal that scene must have been. But I love that scene because they kind of took it to that level of something you wouldn't really see in a movie like that back then.
Poor monster, though. He was so confused.
He was.
He didn't understand.
And we'll get like I said. Well, we're going to swing back around to that. But I do have a very sweet story about that little girl.
Okay.
Would you like to hear it?
Yeah.
Oh shit! Here we go again.
Boris Karloff, who played the monster, was actually a very gentle and soft-spoken man. He was not, crazy, but he was very tall. He was very intimidating. But that little girl loved him and wanted to spend all the time in the world with him while they were on set together. Because she came on like a few days before her scene, because she's only in that one scene. But she got to meet Boris Karloff, and Boris Karloff had kids and was, great with her and everything. So she loved him. Well, the day of the shoot, everyone on set was very nervous and concerned because this was going to be the first time she was going to see him in the monster makeup, and so they didn't know how she was going to react. Obviously, they were prepared to explain, he's not really going to hurt you. This is, this is just for the movie and everything like that. But no, she came on set, saw him in the get-up, and ran over and hugged him. Gave him a big hug and told him she loved him and all that. And this scene was shot on location. It was out, in a real pond or whatever. She insisted that he ride with her down there in the van. And this is legend. I don't know but it's like I don't know if this is for sure, but accounts have recalled that it is true that she held his hand all the way down there.
Aww.
So it was such a sweet story.
Did he actually throw her in the water?
No, that was a dummy.
Okay, good.
Or maybe a stunt little person or something. I'm not exactly sure, but he didn't actually throw her in the water. Yeah.
That's in poor taste.
But no, but getting back to your point, Miss Pengrino, the monster, is Frankenstein's monster really a monster?
Well, I also don't like how it's an abnormal brain that they put into it. But the only reason it's actually abnormal. The only reason it's actually abnormal is because it was a criminal's brain.
Right.
So they just assume it's abnormal.
Well, to be fair, maybe that criminal was a madman, was a psychotic killer.
There's no, there's studies, but there's no definitive test really yet to say that criminals' minds are different from normal people's.
In this case, though, you have to kind of separate that from reality because I guess. This is a monster movie. The most famous adaptation of Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus. It's a great movie. But yeah, it really comes down to, is the monster really a monster? And we're going to find as we watch more of these movies.
No.
We're going to find as we watch more of these movies that there's times when you think, no, he's not a monster, and he's just misunderstood. And then there's times like, no, he is a monster. He is
a
awful.
Monster.
He is awful. So you kind of go back and forth with it, but I think the director of this movie was a legendary director of that time named James Whale, and he was known for making these, he was kind of like the Tim Burton of his day. He did Frankenstein, he did Bride of Frankenstein, he did The Invisible Man, which we watched last night. Well, we sort of watched last night. You were just on your phone. I enjoyed it.
Our roommate Caleb enjoyed it.
Yeah, The Invisible Man's a great movie too.
Yeah, I care to watch it.
But Frankenstein is really, and Creature from the Black Lagoon are the only movies that I really care to watch the sequels for. So, because the sequel, like I said, the sequels to most of these are just cash grabby franchise grubbing situations. But so James Whale, but he was a great director, and he was kind of the Tim Burton of his time, and so we're gonna see.
I do enjoy a good Tim Burton.
That's right. So we're actually gonna see a shift in tone with Bride of Frankenstein. It's gonna be interesting. I look forward to watching that one with you because there's a bit of a shift in tone. This one may keep your interest a little bit more.
We'll see.
Well, you'll see. But no, Frankenstein is an all-around classic. Again, I think it's kind of like monster as metaphor. It's like we're kind of just, I think I look at the monster as sort of being like this creature that is, it's sort of like it represents us. We're just trying to get through this world, but we have all these obstacles that everybody else seems to understand, but we don't understand. We don't understand it. We don't get it. And so that's where the heartstrings kind of get tugged a little bit for Big Frank here, you know. And of course, the monster's name is not actually Frankenstein. It's just the monster. But my point is okay. That's just disrespectful.
Stop it!
But I love Frankenstein, and I love the Frankenstein franchise. I even have a soft spot for those last 3 movies, but they're just absurd. In the 4th movie called The Ghost of Frankenstein, Bela Lugosi's character, who will meet
The Ghost of Frankenstein.
The Ghost of Frankenstein. Well, it's not really a ghost, but the Bela Lugosi's character,
falling down.
Bela Lugosi's character, who will meet in Son of Frankenstein, tries to save the monster and eventually tries to put his brain, successfully puts his brain in the monster's head. And then the 5th movie is actually a direct sequel to The Wolfman. It's actually the first time as far as I know in cinematic history that there was ever a shared universe, a cinematic universe, because it was Frankenstein meets The Wolfman. They come together. And then the last film is called House of Frankenstein, and they continue that, and Dracula joins them in that movie. So, but again, by that point, box office returns were not as sharp.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. But Frankenstein, all around classic. And add it to your Halloween viewing this year. And 2 words, enjoy.
Or try.
We'll see you next time for Bride of Frankenstein.